Good morning, everyone. I think most of you know us, but if you don't, I'm Nayaswami Jyotish, and this is Nayaswami Devi, and we live all over the place. I'll begin by reading from Yogananda's beautiful prayer demands, Whispers from Eternity. This is, "Bless me that I may perceive Thee through the window of all activities. Bless me that I may perceive Thee through the windows of all joyous activities. Look upon me and cheer me always as I engage in my daily duties. Let my every action, whether waking, sleeping, or dreaming, be sprayed by the fountain of Thy presence." These are such beautiful little prayer demands. It's a very good practice, in fact, to take one of these, like a simple one like this, and memorize it, and maybe repeat it for a week. And you can find in this book a prayer demand that would fit every little, little mini drama that you might be going through. If you're having difficulty at work, for instance, this would be a beautiful little prayer demand to memorize and repeat as an affirmation. And that will help draw the presence of higher consciousness in which those difficulties will begin to disappear. So I want to talk a little bit about service, especially today, because really the reading gave us a nice balance. It said that when you're concentrating on the presence of God, concentrate completely on the presence of God. Because when that consciousness comes, see, our problem is not so much that we don't want to make spiritual progress or that we don't want to concentrate on God. We simply forget to do it. And that forgetfulness, that forgetful state, can go on for a long time. We can go an hour, we can go a day, we can go a year, we can go lifetimes, not paying it for, just forgetting to think of God. So the first part of this reading is that when the consciousness of God comes, be grateful and hold on to that. Don't just take it for granted. The mere thought of God is a blessing in and of itself. Master said, "For those who think me near, I will be near." So the very thought of God, soon as you think of Him, in whatever form is dear to you, that very thought awakens us to His presence. And so don't just take that for granted. Hold on to that for as long as you can. But the reality is that mostly we won't be able to hold on to it all the time, or maybe very long. And that's because, it's because we haven't ripened spiritually. It takes a long process. And part of that process is through service, through activity, because without activity, we won't be able to clear out the karmic patterns that keep us from remembering God. When in the spring on a beautiful tree, let's say a beautiful peach tree, come out the lovely blossoms, and everybody thinks, oh, springtime has come, the warm sun is here, the trees are beautiful, everything is lovely. And then what happens? Those blossoms fall. They wither up, they dry up, and they fall away. And then a little tiny fruit, this is a natural process that goes on. A little tiny fruit forms from that beautiful blossom. And at first that fruit is not very lovely at all. Gradually it grows a little bit, but in the first stages, that fruit is a little bit hard and a little bit sour. And so it is as we begin to grow, as the evolution of the soul happens, the first stage in the ripening process is that we're a little bit hard and we're a little bit sour. I don't know if you know anybody like that. I don't know if you're occasionally like that. But in that state, because the energy has not developed yet, then we're drawn to the vibration of things that are hard and sour. And what does that mean? The music that you listen to. Somebody who's not very evolved will listen to music that's not very evolved, because that's the vibration that that they enjoy, that they feel comfortable in. So the music will be angry. Now, I don't know if people, I never listen to rap, but the little bit that I've heard, it sounds angry and aggressive and, fighting back. And so if you're drawn, if your vibration is a little bit angry, a little bit aggressive, then you'll be drawn to that. Country music, somebody said once, what happens when you play a country western music record backwards? You get your job back, you get your home back, you get your wife back, you get your truck back. And so, I mean, it is funny. In fact, I had a friend who was being given he was trying to pick out a car. And so he had tried different ones. And so he was riding around with one salesman. And the salesman told him that joke. He bought the car just because he liked the joke so much. And enjoyed the... But it's true, that if we're having a hard time in life, we're going to be drawn to entertainment that reinforces that. And so by shifting our outer circumstances, our what we take in, it will help change our consciousness. So listen to uplifting music, read uplifting books, watch uplifting videos. Master said that if you're feeling dour and down, actually push your muscles up, because there's a connection between the muscles in the face and the brain, and that connection. If you smile, you'll feel happy. If you're down, you'll feel kind of like this. If you're mentally down, you never hear somebody saying, I feel so depressed. Or somebody, I feel just wonderful. The energy of the body. Now, this is a bad joke, and I probably shouldn't tell it here, but it was amusing anyway. It takes 28 muscles in the cheeks in order to produce a frown in response to someone. It only takes 8 muscles to reach out and slap him. Yeah, sorry about that. So, at any rate, during this ripening process that goes on, we need to reach out and try to be in company of people whose energy is more uplifted than ours, and to fill our mental diet and emotional diet with things that will uplift us. Little later on, we're going to read the Festival of Light, and during that, we're going to read the story of the evolution of the soul that is told as the story of a little bird. And the little bird goes through this process of ripening. At first, it comes out, it's born, and its parents, it's beautiful. That's kind of like the blossom time. And the parents say, share with others the gifts that go out, be fruitful in the gifts that we've given you, and share them with others, even as we've shared with you. And then the little bird begins the process on his own, and he goes into a state of rebellion. And he says, what else is wisdom if not to keep mine for myself? And so as we begin to grow, we go through that stage. What else is wisdom if not to keep what is mine for myself? What else is wisdom if not to make as much money as I possibly can, even if it means cheating the customers, even if it means being a little bit dishonest? What else is wisdom if not to get mine for myself? And we're, unfortunately, the mass consciousness is of that second stage of evolution. And so don't look at mass consciousness as a guide to how you should be in this world, because it is not yet very evolved. Look to the saints, look to the great ones, look to the wisdom, look to the friends that you have that are more uplifted. And that vibration, it's as if that feeds you. And when the sour, hard little fruit is fed by sunlight, by light, and by nutrients, then it begins to grow. And as it grows, it starts to become sweet, and it starts to become soft. But in the stage in between, it's the tests of life are going to give us a hard time. It's going to knock us around. In Sri Yukteswar's ashram, in the autobiography of a yogi, there was a young man who came there. And imagine having the good karma to be beloved of a great, great avatar like that, to have the chance to live with him, to learn from him, to be in his presence all the time. But this soul wasn't ready and rebelled and left, and Sri Yukteswar was very sad about it and basically said, now life must be his teacher. Now he's got to go out and take courses from the school of hard knocks. And so we get beat up and knocked around, and we get tests and we get frightened. And in the story of the little bird, darkness comes. And the little bird is afraid. He says, how can I fly in this darkness? So these tests come, and life seems to get dark. Life seems to get frightening. And we become a little bit afraid and a little bit contractive. And we say, how can I fly? How can I survive in this darkness? Things are so... Al-Qaeda could get me, and the stock market could get me, and everything seems to be a threat and a source of anxiety. And we grow afraid, and when we grow afraid, we tend to shrink in on ourselves. The more we think about ourselves, the more unhappy we're going to become. It's an odd thing, but that's the way it is. The less we think of ourselves, the more we think of others, the more we serve others. That's why in this story, here's Mary rubbing costly spikenard on the feet of Jesus. And Judas, who is about to betray Jesus, says, why are you doing that? Why don't you sell that and get the money and give it to the poor? And he's in a state of rebellion. And so we go into that state of rebellion. We pull away. We begin to think of ourselves. We begin to think of our own needs. And when we do that, we grow afraid because the ego is not sustainable, ultimately. The more we pull into the ego, which is thinking of ourselves as separate entity. So when you think of yourself as separate from the whole, you're going to grow more afraid, more anxious, more unhappy, and more into the darkness. And so what's the answer to that? The darkness says back to the little bird, don't be afraid. Surrender to me. and you'll be renewed. Give yourself, the unknown is filled with light, is filled with sustenance. Don't be afraid. Offer yourself. And so it takes faith in that stage, and it takes energy, and it takes the commitment of being on the spiritual path and giving our best energy. And then the universe around us will support us. And the next little phase is the little bird goes into a storm, and wind lashes at his wings, and rain, and he grows afraid again and contracts. And give yourself into my hands. And then we're supported. And so the trials that we go through are unavoidable, but it's part of the ripening process. But we're given, unlike the poor little fruit hanging from the tree, we're given the potential, the power to speed up or slow down that ripening process. A little bit, there's a plant, the sunflower. In Italy, it's called girasole, light turner or sun turner, because it follows the sun. And so we have that much power. We can follow the sun, we can follow inspiration, or we also have the power, unlike the sunflower, to turn away from the sun, to turn into darkness. But if we follow the sun, if by our own effort, then the sun feeds us and we ripen more quickly. And then as we get into that state, we ask where the source of our power comes from. See, that fruit can't ripen on its own. It needs the sun. In fact, it isn't doing anything at all. It's just hanging there. It's just hanging out. That's all we're doing. It's the tree that's drawing the nutrients and the branch that's feeding us with those nutrients. It's the sunlight that is providing the warmth and the through photosynthesis, the energy that we need to grow. It's God who is doing it all. And so in the next stage after the quest, we begin to understand that it's not us who are doing anything. And as we begin to understand that, life, instead of being hard and frightening and filled with anxiety, starts to feel warm and comfortable, and we don't have to do very much effort. Swami, who produced enormous amounts of output in his life, said, I don't do anything. I just kind of cooperate, and it's all done through me. Now, people who haven't experienced that think, oh, yeah. He's just kind of saying that. But no, he actually experienced it. And I know from our lives that we're experiencing that too. The more we have the sense that God is working through us, God is doing it all, the less effort it seems to take. And the less anxiety there is. And you can't fail, and you can't starve, and nothing can really go wrong. Sure, there's a little drama, but it doesn't become frightening. It becomes kind of interesting. So the more you give yourself into the hands of God, the more you give yourself into the light, until at the final stage of the soul's evolution, we come to the point where all we want to do is offer up the little light that is in us into the blazing light of infinity. We want to merge our light. We don't want that separation to happen anymore. And so we offer up that little light that is in us into the blazing light of infinity, and we're drawn into that light. And then at that stage, we see that we never did anything. It was only the divine playing through us, playing the time that we were anxious and upset and hard and sour, and the time that we got softer and warmer and sweeter. And it was always just the divine, playing the different phases. But as I say, we have the power to turn toward the sun or to turn away from the sun. Anandamoy Ma said, you really have only one thing that you can control, whether you love God or don't. And so that's the limit of our control, but how much of a difference it makes when we turn toward the sun, because then life becomes beautiful. And so do we. Flowers on, see, even the altar is cooperating with it.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to share two different aspects of our reading this morning, not too different from what Jyotish has already shared. But the first point, that it's a very important passage from the Bible where Judas is rebuking Jesus, saying, why are you letting her waste this expensive product on your feet? And he says, let her do it. He said, why don't you sell this and give it to the poor, the money? And he said, the poor you have always with you, but me you have not always. And that has many, many levels of meaning as our guru interpreted the Bible. But the most important for us is the poor, meaning lower consciousness, mundane awareness, worldly consciousness. We have that always with us. But me, Christ says, meaning a higher vision of life, that's rare. And so let her honor that. And in our own lives, we go through the day and maybe we have the practice of getting up in the morning and meditating, maybe we don't, but maybe we just like to say a prayer when we wake up. But whatever we do to align ourselves with the Christ consciousness, which is present throughout creation, whatever it is that we do, that can color our whole day, our whole life, if we realize this is important. If we just get caught up in the busyness of life, we have that with us always. But Swami Kriyananda told a beautiful story from when he was a young monk in Master's ashram. And he had the habit every day at lunchtime, he would go and get his tray from the cafeteria, and then he would put it down, and he would go and meditate for a period of time. He said usually a half an hour. And then he would come back and eat his lunch. And one day he was doing this. He got his lunch, set the tray down, went off and meditated. But something special happened that day. That day, he went into a deep state of God awareness, of bliss, and he was so enjoying it. And he just rested in that. And then his mind began thinking, oh, my lunch is waiting for me. It's getting cold, and then I have to go back to work. And he said, now that I know how to enter this deep state of meditation, I won't forget. I'll come back to it later. And one can imagine the rest of the story. For any of us who have practiced meditation over the years, you know those states are elusive. They'll come like a thief in the night, as Christ said. They'll come in our meditation and we think, oh, now I get it. And then it's gone. And so Swami went and had his lunch and later went back to meditate, but he couldn't again return to that state. And he said, when he really very strongly emphasized this with us, when you are meditating or praying or even just going about your daily business, if you feel the presence of God, don't just say, I will come back to you later. Me you have not always with you. Stop and focus on that moment. Make it dynamic to your awareness. One of the great saints of India, Ramakrishna, said that where the common man stops and pauses if he sees an image of God, the devotee falls down and worships. And so don't just be like a tourist devotee, passing and seeing it all. You know, last year or 2 years ago, Daiva and Gangamata and Jyotisha and I led a pilgrimage to Assisi, and we went to many different, very blessed places there. And it was very interesting to see the difference between our group and other groups. I mean, people don't come to Assisi, it's not like Disneyland, you come for spiritual reasons. But so many people would just walk through, oh yeah, there's the tomb of St. Francis, oh, there's St. Clare, oh, okay, that's, you know, and they never stopped. And our group was so different because everywhere we went, we paused, we sang, we meditated, and we really got something out of it. And even some of the priests who attended those places commented and said, your group is really different. And sometimes they said, are you Catholic? And we would say, in our own way, yes. But meaning that we had great love for God and for Christ. And so we need to walk in this world like pilgrims and see that there are sacred moments all around us, everywhere, every day, a butterfly, flowers turning, the beauty of a rose. I love walking the streets of Portland because the roses are so exquisite, the subtlety of the coloring on their petals. And you can say, oh yeah, that's a peace rose, and that's a, you know, but it's not just a name, it's an experience. And the more we stop and pause and experience life in that way, the deeper and deeper we become aware of God's presence. And that's one reason we mentioned this before, but we came to the school ceremony on Friday night, the graduation ceremony for our Living Wisdom School. And for children, everything is delightful. A bug, a worm, you know, whatever it is. And if you stop and look at it, it's like, that is important. It isn't, oh, come on, we have to go now, we have to go to your soccer game, come on, get in the car. It's like, life is, God is showing, He's revealing Himself to us every moment. But we in our hurry to get on to the important things of life, we miss the meaning of life. And that meaning is just to look at the world and see God's smiling at us in the flowers, blessing us in the breeze, delighting us in a butterfly. Who made all those things? We were just looking, our dear friend Darshana placed a plate of fruit up in the minister's preparation room, and there were these beautiful blueberries and bright red strawberries and little strips of golden mangoes. And I just thought, we were all saying, God didn't have to make it so pretty. It could have just been, you know, like processed food. It could have just been colorless and lifeless. But He didn't do it that way. And it's up to us to say, appreciate the world that God gave us in every moment. And when we begin doing that, it's like it all becomes wonderful. It all becomes marvelous. You can be standing I remember some years ago with Swami Kriyananda, we were in San Francisco, and he had been there. We were just establishing our work in the San Francisco Bay Area before Palo Alto was established. And Swami had been there in San Francisco for the summer teaching. And then he was going to go back and leave Jyotish and I in charge. And the night before he left, he said, let's go out and have a nice dinner. And so we did. And then he said, I noticed that one of my favorite movies, Pride and Prejudice, the old version with Laurence Olivier and Greer Garson, I noticed that that's playing. Let's go see a movie. So there were about 10 or 12 of us, and we all went to the movie. And we weren't really paying too much attention. It was Saturday night. It was in a very bad part of town, a lot of bars and drugs and all sorts of things. And the car was parked quite far away. And so we had to walk through all that to get to the car. And and Swami just gathered himself up, in his spine, when he was a young, vibrant man, he had such beautiful posture. I mean, it was really the fruit of a lifetime of Kriya Yoga practice with the energy just going up his spine. And it was like the prow of a ship, like that scene in the movie Titanic, just whoo, cutting through. And we all followed behind him. And it was as though we were a ship of light crossing through the ocean of darkness. And it was such a beautiful moment. And everything around us, the squalor and the beggars and frankly the depravity, it was all there. But it was like, life is beautiful if you remain in the ship of God's presence. And I know that that was Swami's parting gift to us, because we were being left in San Francisco to build a work there. And it was like, just stay, God is your pilot, follow behind in his wake, everything is beautiful. And no matter what happens, we can do that. And so just remember to highlight those moments. And if you stand, and if every time a little butterfly lands on a flower in front of you, stop and think inwardly, thank you, God. I see you smiling at me. And truthfully, the more you do that, the more your life becomes filled with magic moments where God is smiling at you in the clouds and bathing you in the soft rain and being very flat in a flat tire, all of those things. But if let me tell you a story. And then I'll close with this. I was driving a friend home from the hospital. She was going through chemotherapy, and we were coming home, and she was quite ill. She had reclined the seat, and I was driving back to Ananda Village, and all of a sudden the car started, chugging, 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 and I realized I had a flat tire, and I didn't know how to change a flat tire. And there she was, she needed to get home, and I just stopped for a moment, and I just said, Lord, we need your help now. In that moment, this horrible old beat-up pickup truck pulled up, and these two guys that I never would have ordinarily have spoken to, just looked really like they were going to hijack the car or something. They got out, and they walked over, and they said, looks like you need some help. And I inwardly said, thank you, God. And I said, yeah, we do. And they changed the tire in a second and pulled off, and we got home. It was a magic moment, but live in the expectation of those magic moments. And then God says, okay, you get it. You get what's going on. I can play with you now. I can be there when you need me. I always was there, but you never looked. And when you start looking, he's there more and more. So Christ said, me, you have not always with you. Let's not live that way. Let's live so that Christ, God, Guru, whatever form we worship, is always with us. And when we do that, we solve the riddle of why we live in this foolish world. We live to see God behind it all and to see his face always smiling at us in life's joys, in life's beauties, in life's tests, and in the very final moment when it's all to be done, when we look back and we say, Lord, what a nice life this has been. Let's go home. God bless you.
Father, now that I wander with thee, flowers and fields are alive.